Okay, before I get going on number three, there's a bit of a caveat. It's unfortunate, but at least it means I'm probably on the right path with the way I'm thinking. So I had this whole cute lead in before I was going to start the show, and it was going to say, this ain't no BS. I'm separating myself from the herd. Listen up because I've got things to say. Wasn't really a shot at either of those because it's actually a little bit more of an homage. I really, really appreciate what both of those guys do. I think that Bill Simmons is an absolute genius. He craps out more sports knowledge than I can ever hope to have. And though Colin Cowherd's a bit inflammatory, what I'm doing from an actual logistical standpoint is pretty similar to his. I'm just a singular talking head talking to you guys and hoping you're listening. I say all that to say this because number three is Paul George is the third best perimeter player in the league. Now, for anybody that knows me, they know I've been high on Paul George for a while. I floated out a question a couple weeks ago about if you were starting a team, would you take Paul George or James Harden? Because I think that's a really, really, really tough question. I say all that to say I was listening to BS Report yesterday, and they were talking with Zach Lowe, and they get talking about Paul George, and Zach Lowe says Paul George is the third best small forward in the NBA. I got scooped. It's going to happen. I'm not surprised. Those guys know more than I do, and they're a lot smarter than I am. But I'm going ahead with this because I had already written all this stuff before I heard it, and I still feel pretty confident with it. I wrote it before the game one. I know he had a mental lapse in game one at the very end, but he looked really nice in the clutch. And everything that I see with Paul George tells me that in the next 3 or 4 years, he's got a chance. I don't think he's going to, but he's got a chance to push Durant for the second best small forward in the NBA. I already take him over Carmelo Anthony. And I'm a big Carmelo fan. I think he's the most or second most dynamic scorer in the NBA. He and Durant are kind of in that argument. But you can get Carmelo the ball, and he can score from any part on the floor. I think what Woodson does is stupid because they let him bring the ball down, and he ends up kind of monopolizing the ball a little too much. But that's a whole nother argument. But for my money, I want the guy that's going to go ahead and be the lockdown defender. Paul George is an amalgam of Tracy McGrady and Ron Artest. Now, I know that's high praise, and I'm projecting here a little bit. He's obviously not the scorer McGrady is, but he's got a lot of that kind of shifty agility, the way he slides, the way he moves when he's on his offensive game. It reminds me a lot of him there. And he's got the same kind of, he might be a better perimeter shooter. His numbers aren't great from the three-point line, but he shoots a lot of threes, and he had to take a lot of the offensive load for them because they don't have a point guard that's really a creator. So he forces a little bit. And I don't like the fact that his field goal percentage has dropped every single year, but I don't mind that from a guy that's going to shut down the other guy if his name's not LeBron James. He is a nasty perimeter defender, and he competes, and he thinks he belongs, and I love that. His rookie season, he put up 7.8, 3.7 rebounds, 1.1. None of that's bad for a rookie. Guy at number 10, you probably maybe expect a little bit more, but Danny Granger at the time was still a really versatile scorer. He was still pretty dynamic. Granger's probably, unfortunately, on his way down, but maybe if they can get him on kind of a minimum contract, he can kind of be a producer off the bench because Lord knows they need a bench player. DJ Augustine is the worst player in the NBA, not named Kendrick Perkins. But George has gone up in every statistical category every single year. Points, rebounds, assists, steals. Every single year for 3 years. You hope for that. You expect that. But you don't always get it. Sometimes guys don't get it. I mean, he was seventh amongst small forwards in every major statistical category. Seventh or better. Seventh or better in every statistical category. He was second in three-pointers made from that position at small forward. He was second to Kyle Korver. That's all that guy gets paid to do. That tells me something. He was first in steals per game at that position, and he ended up 13th in blocks, which is lower than I would want him to be for a 6'9" guy. But in all fairness to him, he's shutting everybody down on the perimeter. He can't be caught up in doing that. Guys like Kevin Durant average a lot of blocks, and Kevin Durant's not a bad defender, but Kevin Durant's not a bad defender in the way Larry Bird's not a bad defender. He's really good at being a help side defender. He pays attention. He's good in the cohesive team scheme, but he's not. I can Avery Bradley, Paul George, 4 feet on pretty much any ball handler not named LeBron James. He's going to struggle with LeBron James the way everybody else does. And it makes it a little tough because I think the postseason, as everything that I'm talking about here, helped validate what I'm saying. But LeBron James is going to get his. LeBron James is amazing. But Paul George is really good. He's really, really good. And I know that people kind of already recognize it. He was an all-star this year. I don't know that people understand what he does from an entire standpoint. He may be top 5 overall players in the NBA, and that's saying a lot. And that may be a bit much. I know there's Chris Pauls of the world. There's a lot of guys. But he affects the game from every standpoint. That guy is a fantasy dream. He's a fantasy dream. If I'm struggling at any position, I can go ahead and put Paul George in, and he's going to affect that. There's not a lot of guys you get to say that about in the NBA. He's second team all defense, and the only reason he's not first team is because LeBron James is there. He owns the record for three-pointers made in a game for the Pacers. The Pacers have had some pretty good shooters. That means he's surpassed Reggie Miller, Chris Mullin, Chuck Person. Those are some pretty good guys. Now, I want him to shoot better than 36% from the three-point line, but I think just like LeBron has, he's going to figure out a way to be a little bit more judicious. I think that as he figures out his game, he's going to be a 24, 25 point per game scorer. If you watch the way that he scores, the way that he can get buckets when he wants to, he has that potential. He's young. He was a head case at Fresno State, not Long Beach State, and he's matured much faster than most of the head cases do. He figured it out. I mean, he would have been a top 5 draft pick anyways if he didn't have some of the background that he did when he was at Fresno State. So people knew that he had the potential to be really good. But, I mean, I don't know that people thought he was going to take this turn this early. I mean, by year 3, would you argue that he's a top 15 player in the NBA? I wouldn't. I feel pretty comfortable with that. And the thing that's amazing, he's not going to get paid. Indiana's going to get a steal with him. And that's a shout out to BS because I did hear that on them as well, but I kind of already knew it. But you're not going to have to max him out. There's going to be several small forwards in the NBA that are getting paid significantly more money to do significantly less. Carmelo's nice. I love him. I think that he takes too much of the blame for what happens with his teams, but part of that is because of how he plays. But that's his game. But I'd rather pay Paul George the same money Carmelo's getting to be Paul George. But hell, if I got to pay Paul George $8 million less a year to be Paul George, I'm making out like a bandit. That is a steal. That's like me. I got to marry a 10. And she's still awesome. Now, with all that said, Indiana, of course, is going to lose this series probably 4-1. But I think it's noteworthy. I think that we need to pay attention to Paul George. And I know that people are already on it. People understand it. I don't know that people... I don't know that people understand it the way that they should. We're watching a guy in the evolutions of some things, and we were watching it the whole season. That's why this started with, everything that I'm talking about started with the season, and the postseason just kind of solidified that. If Paul George was a wilting flower in the postseason, then I wouldn't be saying this. I'd be going, oh, he's a nice player, but he still has some maturation. He likes the spotlight. He feels comfortable where he's at. If you heard him in that post interview, hopefully you didn't see him because you needed to turn down the hue on the green in your TV screen. But if you heard him, he wasn't even down on himself after making a horrible decision. I'm okay with that. I like that. I like the fact that he understands that, he made a bad choice. He's not going to do it next time. He overplayed the position. I don't care about the Roy Hibbert discussion right now. That's a completely different argument. Paul George was the reason. Paul George understood that he was the reason that LeBron James got an easy lefty layup. You need to make LeBron shoot a jumper there. I think that what happened, talked to my dad about this, guy who knows more about basketball than I do, is I think that Paul George, being the dynamic defender he is, being the long, mobile defender he is, was accustomed to being able to overcompensate, and he can overextend himself with most guys. All he has to do is swing open that right leg, and normally he's going to cut a guy off. LeBron James is just quicker and faster than everybody else walking the planet right now. But George wasn't uncomfortable. I don't think that Indiana can push